Hello, my name is Sheryl Shaffer, and I'm the producer and host of Veterans Helping Veterans TV. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce my guest, who happens to be my second Zoom virtual interview, and this is Li Rivera. And so, Dolly, tell me about your military service and which branch you served in, and what did you do? Kind of like a whole bunch of questions all rolled into one.
So I enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1997, and I did that with the hopes of just doing 3 years, getting out, and going to school. But it ended up being 10 years, and I enlisted as a mechanic because I wanted to do something different, and I wanted to have fun. And I thought 3 years it'll be fun. I'll travel. I'll learn a new skill. So I chose to be a mechanic. I did not want to be doing something that traditionally women do. And I think all along, I've always had the idea of doing things throughout my life where by the time I'm a grandma or a great grandma, I can tell these cool stories of grandma doing stuff that people normally wouldn't do. I don't know where I got that idea from, but that's what I did.
Now, that's what they call empowerment. And you go, girl.
Yeah. So it was really challenging because I mean, the military as a whole is very male dominated, but there are certain departments or sections within that are more heavily male dominated than others. For example, as you know, the admin world, you'll probably see a lot more women in that field than in with mechanics, or the medical field has a lot more women than the field of ordnance, that's what we called it, would have. So there were some really challenging moments, but I think that overall it was a really great experience because I learned a lot just by observing how men would behave or how their leadership skills versus a female. And it helped me hone down on how I wanted to lead.
And Dolly, you are a service connected disabled veteran, is that right?
I am. I had some injuries to my back, and there were things that I injured, while on the job, that back then weren't such a problem, and now they are because yeah, it progresses. You get older, your bones get weaker. Well, like I was saying, the leadership styles were different, and I remember hitting a bump on the road when I became an E5. There was this unspoken rule that you are supposed to stop working with your soldiers or with your team. And now, because you've been put in this leadership position, you're supposed to just just delegate and not do anything. And I felt so uncomfortable with that because I've always had that sense of unity and teamwork. I believe that if you're a leader, that you're going to be in the trenches with your soldiers. Of course, there's limitations. There are certain things that they should do on their own because you do have other responsibilities. And also as a teaching tool, um, have them do certain things without you so that they can grow, they can figure it out, so that somebody can stand out of that team and as a leader, and they can be the next person to move up. One of the things that I remember a really good mentor of mine telling me was, don't ever tell your soldiers to do something that you haven't done or that you would never do yourself.
You lead by example.
Exactly. And I took that to heart because I saw it. And I think I took it to heart, not just because I'd seen stuff like that in the military, but growing up too. Like I remember, my father would do certain things that I thought, well, why is he doing that? Or why is he asking us to do that? He wouldn't. So you might not put a definition to those examples that you see growing up, but you definitely get the nuances and the gist of it.
No matter how much we strive as women in the workforce, it is still a man's world. We still have to work within that framework, if you will. The military is a male dominated environment, and that's just the way that it is. So, women, we are supposed to be equal. In many ways, we are, because the military offers you opportunities that are not normally found in the outside world.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And of course, we're not equal in the literal sense. And I have seen some areas where the military has improved, but there are also some, areas where the military definitely needs to do some improvement in. Okay, so I was usually either the only female or one of two or three females in my section because, people come and go. So, uh, for many tasks, I remember that people would avoid them. And I was very, I would say, very submissive at first. I would just go with whatever they were saying. If they told me to go and pick up a soldier, I would pick up a soldier. If they told me to go ahead and handle a horrible, annoying tasking, then I would do that because that was my job. You're in the military, you follow orders. And it felt horrible because I felt like, gosh, this really sucks. Why do they choose me? And I'm like, I know deep down I knew it was because I usually said, okay, sure, that's no problem.
Well, that's part of being a team leader is being cooperative and looking out for the other members of the team rather than just yourself.
But part of it, it made me wonder, like, well, why am I always saying yes to all of this? And I see other people, same rank as me, sometimes higher, and they argue, like, no, I'm not doing that, and then they would talk their way out of it and whatever. And little did I know that my always saying yes and just doing the grunt work would help me get recognized to having leadership skills and, being willing to take on, like it made me look good. While during the process, I was like, this sucks, but there was kind of like a double-edged sword to that because I was very young and I came up the ranks pretty quickly. And a lot of people didn't like that. And it was really weird because some people really encouraged me to, um, strive for the best and do this and do that, go to the NCO board, go to the promotion board, do very good with physical fitness, all of that. I did really well. But then when it came down to actually getting a recommendation to go to the board, the same people who had, constantly told me, hey, you should really go to the board, you should really go to the board. Then suddenly they were like, oh, well, you know what? I don't think you're ready. I think you're too young. Or, I think you need more experience. Here would come this other guy who was always effing around but he was really cool with the guys and he was a hard worker, but he didn't have the same work ethic as I did. He was maybe more of a slacker. And they would always say, oh yeah, let him go. No argument. And I was just like, this is crazy. What a double standard. And
Now, you just hit it. That's exactly what it is. It's the good old boys club.
I think a lot of it is unconscious beliefs that they're not aware of. They're used to certain environments, they're used to a certain way of doing things. And, because you're the newbie, you're disrupting that new environment. So they have to kind of readjust and teach them in a way without really sitting them down, but like teaching them through example that, hey, this is what I'm doing. You asked for a hard worker who would do everything. Here I am. You said that would get me to get promoted. So this is where I'm at now. I'm requesting that. And I mean, overall, it was like I was that teaching tool for them. And in the end, they did end up, recognizing what I had done, recommending me. And that's why I ended up in E6 eventually. Always told me, just watch people before you engage. You'll learn a lot. And that's what I've always done. And I remember I watched him, because he was among a group of people who kind of made themselves stand out, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way, and I ended up falling head over heels over this guy the first time he asked me to go. I think we went out to eat, or I can't even remember because I was so not interested in a relationship. And I went out with him after I rejected him a few times, and my roommate was like, oh, come on, just give him a chance, just go out and have a bite to eat with him and watch a movie or something. I was like, okay, fine. And here we are 21 years later. We hit it off. And I remember he would point out certain things in me that he wanted to see evolve. And one of those things was my submissiveness to authority. And I remember him telling me, like, he would get so upset because I would just yes sir, you know, all the time. And he was like, that's dangerous, you can't do that, you have to fight for yourself, you are letting them walk all over you. I remember when I first walked into the motor pool when I arrived to South Korea with my battle buddy, Tamara. Her and I ended up in the same section. The E7 who was in charge there was this bitter old guy. And the first words that came out of his mouth was, what the F are these effing females doing in my motor pool? Oh. And I remember Sergeant Fluga saying, well, these are your new soldiers. He was like, what the F are you talking about? And they went into his office, and my battle buddy and I just looked at each other and we were like, oh, you know, what have we gotten ourselves into? And he pretty much told us, like, you are freaking females, you don't belong in the army, so I don't want you touching any tools, you're going to clean up after the men. This was 1990, February 1998. And we were just baffled. We're like, what the heck? This guy is crazy. And he had us doing minimal things. We couldn't really like get our toolboxes and start working. And I hated it because I hadn't signed up to be somebody's maid. You know, I wanted adventure, and I wanted to say I had worked on all the Humvees and the 5-ton trucks and the, you know, the M1s and the Bradleys and all of that. I always did as a kid, although I was very submissive, but I didn't do it in a really strong way. And I think that with his help, you know, it just amplified that. It helped me develop that, you know, courage to see things in a different way. And one of those ways that he did that was one day he said, they're the same person, they're just like you. You can't be afraid of that rank. That's just little additional, things on their collar, and they put their pants on just the way that you do. There's no difference. Everything was a battle. It was a battle just to be a woman in the military. It was a battle just to, even in training, I remember I used to get yelled at all the time because, you know, we would get on the prone position and you had to fire your weapon. I had really long, thick hair. And I'd put it up in a bun like you're supposed to, a really low bun, because your Kevlar goes on top, obviously. And when you're in the prone and you have to like tilt your head down to look through that sight, my bun would push my helmet up and cover my eyes. And they would always ask me, like, why is your Kevlar so low? I'm like, well, because I'm in the prone position. And they would argue with me and they would tell me, BS, that's just an excuse. And I was like, oh my gosh, these guys don't know. I wish they had hair like mine so they would know that this happens to women, not just me. Even people, like, just, it doesn't matter if your hair is thick or not. When you have a bun, that will, you know, push your hair. Or like sometimes my battle buddy, she had cornrows. She would put cornrows into her hair because it was more manageable, but it would make it a little, you know, since they were thicker. And she too had these issues. And I think a lot of male leaders don't realize that this is a real issue. It's not talked about. And we had to kind of like plan a little extra for stuff, you know. I would come home or I would call him and say, hey, this is happening. And he would get furious. He was like, you need to go and do blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I wish I were over there. I mean, he was fearless, and I love that about him. And I think that's one of the things that attracted me to him, because he was, even as an E3, because I think he was an E3 when we met, private first class. I remember he got into an argument because somebody said something about us being out, you know, outside of curfew. Meanwhile, everybody and whoever were out and about, not following curfew. but they picked on the lower ranking people. That's how it always goes, right? Like the lower ranking people can make a minor infraction, whereas the higher ranking people can walk around drunk and drive a vehicle and nothing happens. They get a slap on the wrist. Don't do it again, because you're a leader and we respect you, you know? So he was really furious about that. And I remember watching him get into an argument with his platoon sergeant, who was an E7. And he was so mad. He starts taking off his rank and he slams it on the table. He's like, "You want my effing rank? Here's my effing rank." I was like, "What are you doing? Don't do that." You know, we were dating back then when he did that. But I thought, oh my gosh, that is so brave and stupid. When the guys act like that, it's passionate. They're standing up for themselves. If I were to do that, I'm being emotional. I can't handle it. You're not playing by the rules. It's just so different how it's seen. And you have to just be careful, unfortunately, and learn how to navigate that whole world in the military, because it can destroy your career, or you can be seen as this person that knows how to stand your ground. It's so weird, because I wish I could say do A, B, and C so that you look like you want to stand your ground and be in power and confident. But it's not like that, because it's all about who that person is watching you and their unconscious biases.
So if you had your life to live over again, would you still go in and do it the way that you did it? Or would you not make that decision? And another question I wanted to ask you was, did you have your children while you were in the military?
So to answer your first question, would I do it again? Yes, I would. And I know some people might be like, "What? That's crazy." But this is why. I have had to do similar things, you know, like defend myself, stand up for myself, and learn in similar ways in the civilian world. I think that for women, I mean, for everybody, but particularly for women, we're going to find those situations. We're going to find ourselves in those, situations, whether it's in the military or somewhere else, and especially if you're a person who wants to grow and who wants to navigate areas that are normally not navigated by somebody like you. So I think some of the things that were also different, aside from me being a woman, was that I am Latina, and I'm not just like the typical Latina, whatever that means to people, but I'm very different than my own Latinx culture, very different. I am not what people usually perceive me to be, and I don't have the same ideas, the traditional ideas. Like a lot of Latinx people have the idea of staying home until you get married or go to college. And even if you go to college, you come back home and you stay home until you get married, you know, or if a job absolutely has to take you, away. And if you are offered a job that takes you away from your family, you turn it down because family comes first, and that's what you do. That's not me. I just wish that I would have known certain things. Like one of them was when I went in for the 3 years that I thought it would only be 3 years. I thought, well, I'll just do this for 3 years and either change my job or get out, most likely get out. Well, I didn't know that once the military invests that money into your training, they're not going to easily allow you to switch out. That didn't click. And I was 17. I actually entered the delayed entry program. So I had no idea, and I didn't know what to ask. And I had no prior military family members to ask. I mean, they probably would have told me, it's like, "Hey, by the way, it's not going to be that easy, So I spent all 10 years trying to get out of my ordnance field as a mechanic. But by then, I had just had my first child. And that was a whole nother thing. It was so like from being this great leader to, "Oh, how dare you? You got pregnant when we most need you," because I was a drill sergeant at the time. And I used to be embarrassed to say this part of my story, because it was something that was shunned upon, to be a drill sergeant and to get pregnant. And then I realized I don't give a F now, because you know what? The military is not your entire life.
Are you
Children
sure?
are. But like, because it's a really, it's a culture, it's a lifestyle, and there are certain unspoken rules, and one of them was you don't get pregnant when you're on drill sergeant duty. And I did, because every time I uh looking back, every time I was planning or thinking about having a family with my husband, because I got married young, I was 20. um so my husband wanted kids right away, and I was like, no man, no, let's test each other out. We need to see if we're the right, I mean, yeah, we're married, but let's see how good we are. And first it was, okay, I have to make E5, then I have to make E6, and then, oh, but I'm doing this BNOC, the basic non-commissioned officer course. And then it was drill sergeant school, and then it was drill sergeant duty. So around the drill sergeant duty time is when I thought, okay, you know what? I've been postponing this for far too long, and this is crazy. And I remember somebody had, when I got to my unit, there was a female drill sergeant who had gotten pregnant, and man, they talked about her so badly. And I remember feeling bad, but I remember also thinking, how could they shame a woman for wanting a family? Especially if it comes from that whole patriarchal mentality of women have the babies, and and that you're all for women having babies or whatever, instead of the backlash that you hear of women who don't have a baby. It's like, damn if you do, damn if you don't. So I was like, you know what, let's see what happens. And I got pregnant. So I had my first baby, and people were just furious. My first sergeant, when I told him, he like almost didn't even want to look at me. He said, well, you're off duty immediately. I was like, wait, why? It's so early on, there's so much that I can do as a drill sergeant. And they're like, oh, his liabilities. When I got switched to an office desk, the way I was treated was so passive aggressive, and there were these condescending comments, and it became very hostile. And I said, okay, well, I'm not going to get out. I didn't have the intentions, because I was like, I'll just get right back on drill duty, because I wasn't trying to get out of it. uh, I'll just resume, because I knew that, hey, if for some reason you're injured or something happens and you can't continue your drill duty assignment, fine, you go ahead and get over that. And then when you're good to go again, you continue it. So that was my plan. I'm like, okay, I'm going to finish this out. Well, it got so hostile, then I thought, I don't know that I want to be part of this anymore. I feel like I've been fighting to like just be since I entered the military. It's crazy. It's exhausting. It's dramatic, and I don't like drama. I just want to do a job that I love. And I loved being a drill sergeant. It was one of my favorite moments during the military. I got to mentor so many people. I got to see things that you don't normally get to see, um, because you get to know the soldiers, you get to learn the background that they come from. This kid who had recently married his girlfriend because she ended up having twins. She was 19, 18, he was 19. They came from a very poor area in Missouri, and something happened with his pay where he was not getting paid all of a sudden. And so he couldn't provide her with rent money for the trailer, and the trailer had ran out of gas. And guess what? Winter Missouri can be fierce. And he was worried because his two little new infants and his new wife were in the cold, and she was on food stamps because he was in E1 or E2. He didn't make a lot of money, so they qualified. And his drill sergeant had been alerted. He had already told them, it's like, hey, I need help, can you do something? The drill sergeant was like, not my problem, I'm here to train you. Well, I was able to submit paperwork to get his pay back on track and get him back pay. And the sergeant major and I were able to find resources through like Red Cross and other charities around the area where the soldier's wife lived. And we got her some propane tanks into that mobile home. And he was no longer stressed out about the well-being of his family. There were also kids who joined the military to try to get away from really bad situations. I remember one girl, her family was a KKK family, and she said she had been disowned because she was joining the military and she was going to engage with other people who were not white. So that story sticks out because, you know, like you don't meet people like that on an everyday basis. You know, you don't hear about the kid who left their neighborhood because there were too many shootings and he didn't want to be forced to join a gang. That made me, I think, more of an empathetic leader, and it made me want to mentor even more. And I remember when I saw those stories, when I saw those kids wanting to improve themselves, I started thinking of everything I could share with them to help them meet that goal. And I remember a lot of them saying, hey, Sergeant, when I get out of here, I want to be able to get my E3. What do I do? And I was like, here, online courses, correspondence courses. So overall, my military experience was wonderful. It had a lot of challenges, and that's what I focused on today, so that whoever's watching this, if they have a child who's going into the military or somebody who is contemplating on going in, so that they know that there are obstacles that are unique to the military, but you can find very similar obstacles at pretty much in any other field in the civilian sector. The difference is the culture and the mental adjustment that you have to have. So would I do this all over again? Yes, I would. Life is not a if you're going to be challenged. Life is you will. The question is when and what type of challenges are you going to encounter. I think that it made me appreciate life better. It makes me appreciate diversity a lot more. And it's probably why I ended up also doing what I do now. You know, after post-military, service, I created my business, the Dali Talks LLC, and my product is the Diversity and Anti-Bullying Academy, because I think back about my love for sharing the knowledge with all those soldiers that I mentored, that I somehow touched. And I remember at the time I had no idea I had impacted them in any way, until months later, even years later, when either a parent of theirs or they would find me and say, oh my gosh, remember when this and this happened? I'm like, no. Like, well, I remember it well. And thank goodness that you were there. And thank you so much for whatever it is that I did. You know, they'll mention it. And it really opens my eyes to realizing that you, as you're trying to better yourself, as you're just trying to do the job that you're told to do, you impact people along the way. Sometimes it's through intentional actions, and sometimes it's just because you were trying to do the best that you could with yourself, and it got noticed. So with that said, thank you so much for having me on your show.